So I think we'll probably start. Prab has started a recording, so this meeting will be recorded and will be available to members of the public. So thank you very much indeed, and a very warm welcome to this meeting of the Community Planning Partnership Board on the 7th of December 2022. And before we start, I would just like to extend a very warm welcome on behalf of us all to Chief Superintendent Graham Mackey, who has taken up post, I think, about a week ago as our Divisional Commander from Police Scotland, and to John Tomlinson, who will join us at the next meeting as the representative of the Integration Joint Board for Health and Social Care. There's been a change there as well due to our previous member leaving the organisation. So I'll just maybe go around the room, and if I just come to you, if you just say who you are and which organisation or part of organisation that you represent, that would be great. And if John and or Graham want to say anything by way of introduction, please do so. So Ewan, please.
Yes, good afternoon, Chair. My name is Ewan Wallace. I'm the Head of Environment and Sustainability at Aberdeenshire Council.
And Che?
Good afternoon, Chair and everyone. Che Ewing, Local Senior Officer for the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service.
Hannah, please. Hannah, you're on mute.
Sorry, pressing the wrong button. Hannah Powell, the Vice Chair of Communities and Councillor in Central Buchan.
Thank you. And Fiona?
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Fiona McCallum, Business Strategy Manager with Aberdeenshire Council.
And John, please. John Tomlinson.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll be joining you, as Anne has said, so I very much look forward to that and just tuning in today. So thank you.
You're welcome. And Angela, please.
Yes, good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Angela Keith. I'm the Area Manager for Banff and Buchan, but I'm here wearing my hat as the LOIP Lead for Connected and Cohesive Communities. Thank you.
Thanks, Angela. And Prab?
Hi there. I am the Policy Officer at Aberdeenshire Council, and today here as the note taker for the meeting.
Thank you. And Dan?
Hi everyone, my name is Dan Shaw. I'm the Chief Exec of Aberdeenshire Voluntary Action with a third sector interface for Aberdeenshire, but I'm also here as the lead for the mental wellbeing priority of the Health and Wellbeing LOIP.
Thank you. And Glenn?
Hi, good afternoon everyone. Glenn Reynolds, Ward 1 Councillor and Opposition Lead on Communities Committee.
Thank you. Kirsty, please.
Hi there, Kirsty Chalmers from Nestrans with a regional transport partnership covering Aberdeen City and Aberdeenshire.
And Susan, please.
Apologies. Susan Forbes, Health Improvement Officer for the Aberdeenshire Public Health Team, and I'm here as a lead for the HEAL strand of the Wellbeing LOIP.
Thank you. Amanda, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Amanda Rowe. I'm the Area Manager for Buchan with Aberdeenshire Council. I'm also the Chair of the Tackling Poverty and Inequalities Strategic Partnership, and that's the lead group for the Reducing Poverty LOIP.
Thanks, Amanda. And Matt, please.
Thanks, Chair. Matt Lockley, Head of Place and Partnerships for the North East for Scottish Enterprise.
Thank you. And Graham.
Yeah, good afternoon. Delighted to be here. Graham Mackey, I'm the Divisional Commander for Police Scotland for North East Division. Just took up post, this is week 2, so Monday last week. I started, and whilst I'm new in post, I'm not new to the division. The last kind of 5.5, 6 years I've been in a specialist crime division and major crime for Police Scotland, covering the north of Scotland. But prior to that, I was many years having joined Grampian Police and worked in all areas of the legacy Grampian Police. And then we moved into Police Scotland, served in Aberdeenshire, Moray, and Aberdeen City as well. So I'm very familiar with the area and the challenges and all the good work that's going on just now. And it's good to see when I come back that there's still a lot of strong partnership working, which has always been the strength of the North East. So delighted to be getting involved in this position as well. So thanks for having me.
No, thank you very much for coming along. As I say, you're very new to in your seat, so it's much appreciated that you've given up the time to come along today. And clearly, as we go forward, you will take a view, as I'm sure Che will, in his role, as to how best you can serve partnerships across the piece, because both your organisations, as are others, Dan particularly as well, have a huge presence in many partnerships as we go forward. So again, you know, if you wish to come back with any discussions or suggestions that you might have, then please feel free to do so. But I think it's also good for everybody else when you've got fresh eyes coming to the table. If there are any suggestions or improvements or any other aspects of community planning that you might want to share, then you're most welcome, and would enjoy hearing from you in that respect. So thank you very much indeed, and thanks to everybody else for their introductions. So with that, we'll turn to, do members have any declarations of interest before we start? No declarations. If you just indicate by popping up your hand if you wish to speak as we go through the agenda. No declarations, so we will continue on that basis. So the first item on the agenda is the minute of the September board meeting. And can I ask those who were in attendance to agree that that's a correct record of the meeting, please? I'll take silence as an indication of agreement. Dan's nodding, so I'll take that the minute is agreed and approved as correct. We also have the actions from that meeting. And again, I don't know if Ewan or Fiona just want to take us through that. If there are any comments that you wish to make, and then I'll go to members for any questions.
Thanks, Chair. No comments other than what's in the note. Nothing to add to that at the moment. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Do any members have any updates or questions or comments based on the actions? Or do they reflect where we are? Yes, okay, so that is noted. We'll move forward from there. Okay, the next item on our agenda is a verbal update from the Community Planning Partnership Executive. And again, I think that is Fiona. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. So a couple of things to update on from the CPP Executive, which was held on the 2nd of November. The first couple of items were relating to funding requests. First one was a paper from me, which was requesting the executive members' approval for a budget spend of £160, and that was to cover sending out a final communication to Aberdeenshire Citizens Panel members regarding the discontinuation of the panel, which the board had approved earlier in the year, and thanking them for their participation in the panel, and the executive approved that funding request. The next report was for a funding request for the Place project, which is being led by the area manager in Geary, Anne Overton, for a place planning project for Inverurie. The project is being supported by Hub North Scotland and Scottish Futures Trust, who have excellent experience in this area. The Council's strategic leadership team were keen to ensure that we make the most of the investment in relation to sharing the learning across the council, but also recognising that there would be benefits for community planning partners in terms of our increased focus on place. And the executive agreed a contribution of £20,000 towards the cost of consultancy, which is something that all partners will benefit from as we are developing our place-based approach. There were verbal updates provided by the LOIP leads. Amanda highlighted some of the events facilitated by the Tackling Poverty and Inequality Strategic Partnership during the Challenge Poverty Week around the Reducing Poverty LOIP. And also highlighted the work that is being undertaken to collaborate with public transport and Nestrans to help tackle the poverty that's preventing people from commuting, which is impacting on their ability to take up employment. Amanda also advised about the recent extension of the contract with the Citizens Advice Bureau, which makes sure that community-based welfare advice and support is continuing, and provided an update on the Aberdeenshire Child Poverty Action Plan, which is being reviewed and refreshed, focusing on priority families as identified by the Scottish Government strategy. And Amanda has a report later on the agenda today. We also had a verbal update from the Health and Wellbeing Loip Leads. Susan Forbes spoke about the work that is being done with local communities to get an understanding on the level of support that would help them. There's been a big piece around community engagement, which has concluded in September and identified 35 high-level actions across 4 themes, which I think Susan might be speaking about later on. There's a plan to work on those actions to be completed by the middle of December, with progress being reported to the executive and board regularly. We also heard from Ava that they've now recruited a lead officer to take forward the mental wellbeing strand of the health and wellbeing priority. And we were also advised that Ava has recently launched 2 funds, the Just Transition Fund and the Community Mental Health and Wellbeing Fund as well. And the last report that was discussed was around place-based planning. There was a really good discussion around delivering a place-based approach. We spoke about using the existing 17 academy catchment areas as a starting point for delivering place plans, and partners were reminded that we will all have a critical role to play in providing the necessary support in developing the place approach. The executive had asked for a further discussion around the report that's on the agenda today around place, and one was scheduled for the 30th of November. However, that meeting was cancelled just due to the low number of people who were available to attend that meeting. And that's the update from the executive. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Fiona. Do anyone have any questions based on what you've heard? No, one thing that springs to my mind is actually around the cost of living, and everything that we do that actually is impacted by and impacts on our residents and communities' ability to tackle the cost of living and the crisis that it has brought to us. So I just wonder if I can ask Fiona if the executive can consider developing a position statement as a partnership. Doesn't have to be huge document, but it would be helpful as a community planning partnership to set out our position currently about our approach to tackling the cost of living, which feeds into the next report in terms of reducing poverty and inequalities. So I know that every organisation will be doing something in terms of addressing that, but from a community planning partnerships point of view, where are we? What is our position? Have we any actions we need to highlight? Are there any asks we have of partners, etc., etc. So as I say, just a light touch, not a huge document, but I think as a community planning partnership we should position ourselves so that we know exactly where we are in the wider overarching piece around the cost of living. So that would be great if that could be taken back through the executive, please, Fiona, and then reported back. So thank you for that. Any other indications? I don't see any at the minute. Can I just welcome Caroline Hiscox? Caroline is our Vice Chair. So again, Caroline, you missed the initial introductions, but we've got Chief Superintendent Graham Mackey with us. This is Graham's second week in the post. He is now the Divisional Commander for our area. So we did a brief introduction just at the start. So Again, I'm not sure if you've met each other yet in the first week of business, but Caroline is the Chief Executive of NHS Grampian. So I'm sure that you'll be having lots of conversations as we go forward in your respective roles. So it was really just to make that introduction. And John, you know, Caroline, John will be taking over the IGB position from Rona. So he's here as an observer today. So thank you for that. And thank you, Fiona. That's fine. Thanks very much. So we'll move then to item 3 in our agenda, which is reducing poverty, LOIP. And we've got Amanda Rowe, please, to introduce this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I would just draw, firstly, the board's attention to the fact that the report is now more focused. There are some key achievements highlighted to the board, but there is a specific ask around 3 challenges that, as a partnership, we believe we are facing. In relation to some of the achievements, I would particularly draw the board's attention to the Over to Youth 22 event that was held and the lived experience conference that was also held during the Challenge Poverty Week. I was at an event on Monday where one of the keynote speeches was made by the Poverty Truth community, and one of the statements that they made, and it highlights just how important enabling the participation of those with experience is, and ensuring that they influence and co-produce solutions with us. So the quote was, "Nothing about us without us is for us." And it really resonated. So whilst we've had these achievements around our lived experience conference and allowing our young people to take over and look at poverty, we need to continue with that as a partnership. It's really important to ensure that employees and communities continue to be with us. Chair, you touched on the cost of living just before our last item, and the challenges that I'm highlighting, seeking some advice and input from the board are there because of the cost of living crisis. We know that for those experiencing poverty, the cost of living crisis is meaning it's making it harder to get out of poverty, it's drawing people into poverty, and it's making those who do have some form of safety net about them less resilient to something happening in the future. And we're seeing that impact now on services that we deliver. So in particular, we are seeing a real challenge in our ability to provide that emergency food response through winter. We're absolutely clear as a partnership and with many of our food partners that eventually we would like to see food banks eradicated. We would like to see a sustainable approach to ensuring everybody has food security. However, they absolutely still are required, and we are seeing challenges. Food reserves are reducing, less food's being made available through national schemes, so we participate in FareShare. CFINE are our coordinator for that. But supermarkets, rightly so, are much better organised in terms of their procuring, so they don't have so much waste. That's a positive thing for climate change. We also know that people are looking more for the yellow stickers, so we're not seeing so much food coming through FareShare. And ultimately, we're also seeing people are not in a position to donate to the baskets that you see in supermarkets in the way that they used to. So we're seeing food reserves really dwindling. One of the biggest food banks in Aberdeenshire would normally hold about 24 tonnes of reserves. They are down to less than 9. And so they are really going to struggle over winter. We're looking at how we might be able to support through a cooperative partnership and how we can use our procurement streams to try and increase buying power and do some of that buying on behalf of our partners. We're looking at how we work with some of our producers. We've got big fresh fruit and veg producers in Aberdeenshire that we're looking to work with. But some advice and guidance from the board would really be welcome. We're also seeing around income maximisation. It is becoming increasingly difficult to maximise income. However, we're aware that a number of people don't come forward in relation to income maximisation. For whatever reason, they feel they're not entitled, or they feel there might be a stigma, or they just feel, no, that's not for them. as a partnership, we're considering a comms campaign. I'm very aware since this report was written, actually, as a partnership, we have just started, as a community planning partnership, we have just started a comms campaign, which is really, really positive, and it is focusing on saying people aren't alone, and there is no shame in coming forward for those things that you're entitled to. So that may already be addressed through the partnership. And finally, a key one for us at the moment is we have our welfare advice staff embedded in, or we're trying to embed them in GP surgeries. It was really challenging during COVID, so they're generally aligned to a surgery, but at the moment we're not being able to embed them as much as we would like and get that warm handover approach, because we're struggling to get the information sharing protocols agreed. And that's partly because both partners, Council and NHS, obviously our data is incredibly important to us. We're very clear that we need to protect data as much as possible, and therefore the potential of data breaches is a real concern and is a very high risk. However, we are being challenged as to how we can resolve that and ensure that the liabilities on both partners are even and fair. So some support around perhaps helping us unlock that would be helpful. And just a final note to confirm that the board at their next meeting will see the updated Child Poverty Action Plan, which is currently being reviewed and refreshed at the moment. Scottish Government have, we hope today, published their guidance for us on producing that Child Action report. And for newer members to the board, that report is the delivery plan for the Reducing Poverty Law. So really important that we bring it in front of the board as soon as possible. But Chair, I will hand back and hopefully allow the board to have some conversations on the three kind of asks that are in the report.
Thank you very much indeed, Amanda, for that. And the asks that Amanda refers to under 4.3 of the report. Any questions in the first instance for Amanda around what she's just presented or on what's on the paper? No? Well, I'll take you then to the questions. One is around the food crisis. Anybody wants to offer any suggestions? Caroline?
Thanks, Anne. Afternoon, everybody, and apologies I was late, and thank you, Amanda, for the presentation. So one of the discussions I've had with Anne and colleagues around the exec group is how I strengthen the exec group so that I come to this board with a really clear brief on what I need to do and what I don't. So this will not be as comprehensive or as articulate as if I had that. However, the 3 points, Amanda, that you raise have absolutely resonated. So my response to the first bullet around the provision of food and the diminishing ability for those that are willing to contribute to that. I'm not sure what and where conversations have taken place with the mass catering opportunities that happen across all NHS outlets. I'm sure there must have been some in regards to our produce and what we do and don't use. So if you could tell me if that has been exhausted, if not, I will reach into the NHS system and understand what is the art of the possible, if indeed anything. The IG question that you've posed around data sharing, during your speech, I received an email which I haven't read yet, so I will read that and I will tell you what my brief is in regards to the response. Amanda, I might be able to come back to you within the space of the meeting. And then the third thing around the welfare piece, really interestingly, one of the themes that's emerging from my system as a CPP partner is a concern that patients, particularly complex needs patients, are turning off critical bits of kit because it costs too much to run them. So they are using bits of their kit less. And I was asked, I do Q&A things, and I was asked how do we ensure that everybody is maximising the money that they are entitled to? And I didn't know the answer to that actually, so I would welcome some support from the CPP around the advice that I should be giving and our specialist clinicians should be giving to patients if that's possible. So hopefully that's helpful, and I will go and quickly read the email about IG and try and put that into the conversation just now.
Thank you, Caroline. Amanda, do you want to respond?
I do. I will certainly go back and have a conversation about, have we exhausted our discussions with NHS over those mass catering opportunities, because of course NHS are in a number of our communities with those facilities, so that really is great. I will do that. In terms of that patients with complex needs, I was at our Health and Social Care Partnership Strategic Group a month or so ago, and funnily they were talking about that winter planning and how do we kind of take some of the pressures downstream, so that upstream our NHS colleagues, our ARI, our community hospitals are perhaps not going to be so overwhelmed. And funnily enough, that was one of the discussion points, was around those who are perhaps already vulnerable at home, and making that choice, although I absolutely appreciate it's not a choice, but making some of those decisions about what they eat and what they switch off, and that if they are already vulnerable, either being hungry or cold or turning off a key piece of equipment makes them frailer, makes them more vulnerable, and is therefore more likely to push them into needing emergency admissions. So as part of the discussion, we've agreed a pathway with those health and social care teams that will go into people's homes, and we're pulling together an approach that will effectively mean if they go into someone's home and they realise that the house is colder than it should be, something's not on that should be, or there's nothing in those cupboards, there will be a phone number they can call that will give them access out of hours and during the day and at weekends to a welfare rights officer who can arrange for immediate support to ensure fuel debt is paid, to allow the meter to kick back in, to get food out there, whatever that might take. So it's a pathway that we're putting in place. It's similar to a pathway we put in place to do with mums and formula, being able to feed their babies if they're using formula. So we're hopeful that that will be a help. So that maybe gives you an answer to that particular query.
Caroline, would you like to come back?
Yeah, that would be great. So your contact in NHS, Amanda, for the catering would be Eleanor McCann. She's the head of all catering, irrespective of where it's delivered. And if you could just kind of give her a bit of a context, she will help you navigate that. And the response around the support and welfare rights, great if that is embedded in the Health and Social Care Partnership. There's a large proportion of specialist services come out of secondary care, so somehow if we could get that link and that communication of the phone number and what to do, then that would definitely improve, I think, consistency of messaging and access to the right support. So absolutely welcome that. Thanks.
Now I'm maximising my opportunity to bring in Geraldine Fraser here. Maybe not bring you in, Geraldine, but you've heard the conversation. And just for the meeting, Geraldine is moving from Health and Social Care Partnership work to become the executive lead on integrated family portfolio for NHS Grampian. So you can see right away where this links right across that particular piece of work. So I don't want to put you in the spot, Geraldine, because you're still here for Health and Social Care, but I think it's very pertinent based on the work that you're about to undertake. Caroline will keep me right if that's not the intention, but this kind of link and these welfare issues and the maximisation of income, I think you will come across opportunities where you can inform families about these opportunities particularly, and then there's we go to the other end, of course, with the more elderly of our population. So I think there's a great link across here as well, Amanda. in terms of what Geraldine's about to embark on, and and Caroline has given you some good input there. So I think that's really helpful to join all of that up. Susan, please, you're waiting.
Yeah, thanks very much. I guess it was a couple of observations and I guess an offer. We have put the benefits calculator into our income maximisation pathways, but one of the things that we have had fed back to us is the stigma of actually exploring the range of benefits that you might be entitled to. So we are working, this is through the City Community Planning Partnership, we are working with the Creative Campus to help us design some messages. So it'd be fantastic, Amanda, if we can connect into you and join all of that up. I think in terms of you mentioned the Child Poverty Action Plan. I guess it was a question for me because I couldn't see. My understanding is the Improvement Service have done a review of Child Poverty Action plans. I just wondered where I would be able to get a copy of their feedback into our plan for Aberdeenshire, if that would be possible. And then the final thing, just to pick up on Caroline's point around the information governance, or indeed the liability, I had raised that with our team today, and they've been in touch with Aberdeenshire. So maybe between the two of us, we can progress this. Thank you.
Amanda, do you wish to come back?
Yeah, thank you very much. That's great news about the information governance. We'll certainly move that along as much as we can. In terms of the Improvement Service feedback, yes, we have that, so I will make sure that's shared with you, Susan. We've also had Poverty Alliance come in and do some work with us as well to look at our readiness to respond to the Best Start Bright Futures strategy that the new plan needs to link into, and if that's not yet been shared with the board, I will get that shared with the board as well. And any support we can give with the Creative Campus, if they're designing messages, would be great, because we do appreciate that there is stigma attached. And I know the comms campaign that I think the Community Planning Partnership have just recently launched has got some kind of real life voices associated with it via social media, to try and almost take some of that stigma away, to say, do you know, it's folks like all of us, you know, and if it's there and you're entitled to it, absolutely take it. So yeah, if we could link in, that would be great. I don't think we've got any of our comms colleagues on the call, but I know we do have the comms team who have worked on the campaign so far, have quite a lot of insight into it. So linking them in with the Creative Campus would be a really good idea. So thank you for that.
In fact, we do have a representative of the comms team today. It's Mr. Wallace. Ewan and Kate have swapped roles. There's a technical term for it, but actually Ewan's here today in that role, I would guess, Ewan. But yep. Sarah Rochester's been leading on the campaign, and it's You Are Not Alone. We launched it a few days ago, and BBC picked that up. So I did an interview with BBC. So again, if there's an opportunity, Amanda, through that route as well, because the journalist I did ask, would he consider picking this up as we go along? So there are opportunities to perhaps engage with. I've got the contact details. If we want to do some BBC interviews or features or something like that, I do think we should take that opportunity. But it's Sarah in the comms team that has been leading on that. So again, let's use our communication outlets where we can. Hannah, please.
Thank you, Anna. It was just a comment on the income maximisation. Amanda, is there anything out there already that you have, which is a list of funds and who's available for to apply for them? Because as you know, we were in a situation this week when a member of staff referred a family through a fund I'd never heard of, but I don't think it was quite appropriate. So there are so many. Is there something already that we can all use that would be helpful? Members included.
I will take that back. We did used to have a tool, Councillor Powell, which did exactly that. It gave us the ability, and I think certainly our children and families colleagues certainly had access to it, and it was that ability to, based on an individual's needs, search and find funds, whether they were bequests or trusts or whatever they were, that might be suitable for somebody to apply for. So could you leave that one with me, and I will find out, and then I can share back with yourself, but also share into the wider CPP as well.
Thank you.
And
Sure.
can you just check, Amanda, if that is available, that it is included in the cost of living website page that certainly the council has put up, so that link is there as well. But again, I would just ask if partners have all got these access to these kind of things as well, because it struck me when you talked about the pathways, Amanda, that actually Graham and Che, they have staff going into people's homes on a daily basis also for various reasons. So it would be helpful just to make sure to check in with all the partners that if they would like any of this information, or indeed a signpost to where to find it for their colleagues, because again, it goes back to my original suggestion that we have a position statement or position plan for the partnership, because we may all be developing these tools or these pieces of information, but actually if there's one place to access it, it might be helpful. But please, if any of our partners want any information around any of this, then Amanda will be able to help, or we can direct you to the right place. But I think if we've got a collective approach to some things, that may be helpful. Okay, any other comments or questions? Again, Amanda, do you feel you have your questions? Do you think they've been considered and responded to?
Yes, thank you. I feel I have picked up some really good additional things we can look at. So very helpful. And if any partner, when they get back to their desk and they've had a chance to reflect, if they think of anything else, please do just drop me an email. That would be great.
Maybe through our economic development colleagues as well, Ewan, to try and identify and encourage our food and drink producers across Aberdeenshire to become involved. You know, the thinking particularly the larger, as Amanda said, the larger producers, of which we have quite a few. I know Matt's moved seats, but he'll be aware of some of those as well. But I do think it would be helpful if some of our economic development colleagues could encourage companies to contact with the strategic partnership through Amanda. That'd be great. Okay, with that then, the recommendations are to acknowledge the achievements identified in relation to the delivery of the LOIP, reducing poverty, give direction on the challenges identified in the report, and identify any changes or improvement within this area of work, which the Tackling Poverty and Inequalities Strategic Partnership Group should consider progressing as part of future work plans. Can we agree that, please? And just for clarity, I'm reading out the recommendations for the recording. It's just that if anybody listens and doesn't have access to the papers, then at least they know what we're agreeing to. So again, just for clarity around that. So thank you very much indeed, everyone, for your contributions to that conversation. I think that was very helpful. We move then to the next item, which is connected and cohesive LOIP. And this is Angela who's going to lead on this. Again, we have some recommendations, but if you have any questions of the partnership, Angela, I will just invite you to make those clear now. Thank you.
Chair. Yeah, in my attempt to shorten and simplify the report, might be helpful for the new faces on the call today, just for me to remind the group that Connected and Cohesive Communities is the group that has strategic oversight of the locality plans in the 4 northern towns of Banff, Macduff, Fraserburgh and Peterhead. The group considers the activities at a local level through the locality plans, reflecting on the gaps and the lessons learned, and reflects and recognises the positive work that can be made through transferable activities, particular to areas where locality plans don't currently exist. On that basis, the group expanded their membership to have representation from all 6 areas across Aberdeenshire to ensure that emerging issues were identified and recommendations for potential partnership-based solutions were discussed and offered. To support that approach, a thematic action plan was developed to monitor and evaluate the outcomes and outputs. However, I have to say that due to a lack of resources this year, that hasn't been fully developed how I would like it, but it does continue to be a focus of our work, and we've got a meeting next week and we'll pick up on that. So following on from the update in the report itself, the group will continue to work towards the place approach and the future needs of locality plans. That's digested a bit more in the last report that's before you today. And the work of connected and cohesive communities, it's a tongue twister, it clearly supports the direction that the board has agreed, and will aim to build on the discussions held at the workshop in October to consider and support a partnership approach to place planning, whilst trying to ensure that the social economic issues and priorities set out in the locality plans continue to be a clear priority and focus of the community planning landscape, both at local levels but at an Aberdeenshire level as well. In terms of the locality plans themselves in each area, it was hard to shorten the narrative around that, as I didn't want to miss anything out. But the report aims to capture some of the positive partnership working focused on the pertinent, important issues facing communities at this time. Cost of living, as Amanda has mentioned, is clearly an area that the locality plans focus on, and indeed is a clear priority that straddles through all our community plans, and indeed the other LOIT priorities that you will receive updates on this afternoon on. From a Banff and Buchan perspective, I'd like to highlight to the board that rural transport continues to present many challenges for communities in the west end of the Banff and Buchan area, with anecdotal and factual information coming through about people struggling to access day-to-day essential services and facilities, including healthcare and hospital appointments, both at a local and wider area levels. The report highlights as well that there was a workshop, a really helpful workshop that the NHS hosted considering their transport strategy, and we were invited to highlight, amongst other things, the impact of reduced transport connectivity and frequency and cost in the Banff and Buchan area. It allowed us to highlight and showcase the partnership working that we have with our rural partnership, as they are really an important provider of rural transport in that area in the absence of other networks. As Amanda's report highlights, there is other wider work that's being touched on, but it is important that I think the board recognises that rural connectivity in that area is one we're struggling to get to grips with. I'd like to continue in Amanda's positive focus though, and the report does mention, but more detail was available today at the Banff and Buchan Locality Planning Group around the work of the foyer. And they have become very quickly embedded in the Banff and Buchan area, based in the recently renovated historic Vinery building in Banff. If you haven't been, I would absolutely encourage you to take a visit to the facility. It's beautiful. And the presentation that the local community planning group received this morning absolutely captured the positive outcomes that they're delivering to that local community. And an extensive list of examples, but ones to focus on around a really positive community garden food growing project, resulting in healthy cooking courses, also a focus around health and wellbeing programme, and more physical sessions around arts and crafts and digital courses, all aiming to enhance and alleviate that social isolation piece. All the sessions that they have set up has been fully and over committed, and they continue to focus on these priorities going forward and strengthening that wider partnership approach to the work that they're doing. They also mentioned today, and I think it's important really just to recognise the importance of their work and the volunteers that they've managed to capture, and they're even opening on Christmas Day and providing a 3-course meal and activities for 24 vulnerable people that's been identified. So a really good news story for the area and the local community accessing this service. Finally, my report mentions the work of the Shaping Places for Wellbeing, which initially focuses around Fraserburgh and the already positive direction it's taken. Again, there was a short presentation to the local community planning group this morning, just to set out the main aim of the programme. It's planned to host a workshop on the 3rd of February, inviting partners to learn more about that work and identify the key stakeholders to join the steering group. The main aim of the programme is to work together and coordinate our actions to ensure they contribute towards a triple win, is what they're referring to it, and that's an approach to enhance the well-being of our people, planet, and create greater equality. So all very pertinent and relevant matters that sit right across our community planning priorities. And the report does invite the board to receive a presentation on that programme and learn more about the outcomes of the workshop in the new year. So thank you, Chair. That takes you a bit of a whirlwind through the report. I'm happy to take any questions or observations on any of that further updates.
Thank you very much indeed, Angela. And obviously a lot of work is happening in the Banff-Buchan area, so and across Peterhead. So any questions or comments for Angela? Nothing at the moment. I welcome, Angela, your contribution in terms of the approach that we're going to take to place planning. And I think it's worthy of noting that whilst we don't want to lose any of the good work that is going on, because again, you know, no point in throwing babies out with bathwater, but I do think that the approach to place plans, and again we had a presentation at that about that at the workshop in August, but I think that would be inclusive of the whole of Aberdeenshire, because much of what you've described that has been captured within locality planning in your own areas actually is now the case across much more of Aberdeenshire than it ever has been. And I think that the situation through the cost of living, the poverty agenda is actually an issue for communities right across the piece. So that approach that we have agreed to make to deliver place planning in the future, I think is a very important one. And, you know, whilst it's not going to happen overnight and we won't just, you know, put a line through what we're doing and suddenly do something else, I think it's going to be helpful, and we'll hear a bit more about that later on from Fiona, to actually acknowledge that within the work that you do, Angela, there will be some movement to transform that into a place planning approach. But it's not to take away any of these issues that you are dealing with and reporting on today. Hannah, please.
I just welcome the focus on the rural public transport and your recognition that it does affect mental health. And I just wondered how the NHS, do we know when their transport strategy is developed, or how we input to that? Do we have any update on that?
Before I go back to Caroline and or Susan, the workshop that was referred to, because I was at that too, was really based on Health and Social Care Partnership Strategic Plan, and they're trying to develop a strategy, or develop a policy plan to align with the strategic development plan for health and social care. So it's specifically around that kind of agenda. But Ewan might want to come in and touch on some of the work that Public Transport Unit are doing. But there is a health transport strategy in place, and that reports through Kirsty's colleagues in Nestrands. So again, there are a few different strands that come around this, and I'll invite comment from each of our representatives. But it is about managing that and how best we deliver that. And again, maybe ask Caroline to comment on the thinking around secondary care hubs, so that transport becomes less of an issue for some people if they're trying to access appointments, etc. So a whole host of things have come out of this, Angela, in terms of what some of the challenges are. So if I speak to maybe Ewan first.
Thank you, Chair. Yes. So in terms of there's probably two strands to this. So the first one, in terms of and referred to quite correctly by Angela in her report about we've started the revision to the local transport strategy for Aberdeenshire Council, and a core part of that is absolutely going to be the provision of passenger transport services going into the future. And we've had extensive work to look at how to try and ensure that we continue to provide those services into different locations as much as we possibly can within the budgets available. But we know it's been a particularly difficult time, the last 18 months to 2 years for the wider sector. So we've tried to give priority to those areas where there are no alternatives. In parallel to that, you're correct, Chair, in terms of flagging the Health and Transport Action Plan. That's a multi-agency piece of work that's been in place now for, well, I think it was first established in 2008, actually, Kirsty, or thereabouts. And a core part of that has been to try and fill the gaps in terms of allowing people to get to and from their healthcare appointments. I would have to say I think that's been one of the successes of that piece of work. It's tackled this at source as much as possible, but I think we're always going to see that as an issue. It's not going to meet the needs of every single individual, but anybody who gets a healthcare appointment should have the information now included in their communication that says, here's your options, here's a number to phone, and it's a pan-agency approach in terms of having people who operate those phone lines and work as much as possible with individuals to fill the gap to get them to the healthcare appointments. So I think that has generally progressed pretty well, but it's not to say that couldn't be done. We can go back and always look at that to see if there are particular gaps that we're seeing in different parts of Aberdeenshire. And definitely in terms of I've instant messaged the manager who will be leading on the development of their own local transport strategy, just to ensure that I know it will be coming here. It's an issue that will come in front of the CPP board, along with a whole range of other stakeholders to try and join that together, and you again find those gaps and see what actions that we can take collectively to fill them the best way we can. So that's kind of those two elements, Chair.
So thank you very much, Ewan. I think what you said there about actually pulling everybody together, so we've got one approach, would be really, is really the key one. So Geraldine, you wanted to come in, and then I'll maybe ask Kirsty to update us in the Nestrands approach. Geraldine.
Thank you, Chair. It was just to highlight some of the work that the Health and Social Care Partnership's been doing, particularly around about some place-based strategic needs assessments, and transportation is one of the themes that does come out very often in terms of the focus groups and the feedback. And again, that's a targeted area of work for us, thinking about how we deliver services in the community and allow access to particularly people that live in rural areas. So there is certainly a focus on that. And also one of the kind of models that we are kind of looking to build on is the hub and spoke model, so that people can access services as locally as possible. And we've had good support through, I think, in terms of transportation to vaccination appointments, and that is something that's made available to everyone, particularly people who are maybe not able to travel themselves. So we do keep monitoring that to make sure that, again, that facility is available. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Geraldine. I think the key to what you've just said is actually making sure that the community are aware that they can get these services. I think that's something we need to perhaps have a look at. Kirsty and then Susan, please.
Yeah, thank you. I don't have I mean, Ewan's probably covered quite a lot of it. Obviously, Nest Trans are supporting the Health and Transport Action Plan post, which is filled by Andrew Stewart, and he does an awful lot of work, and the majority of the work in that. So we're continuing with that. The regional transport strategy was published 2021, so it's a new strategy, and that really does recognise, I think, the difficulties and the challenges of public transport provision in rural areas and sort of health and transport. So I think from a Nest Trans point of view, we're really trying to, I guess, support and work with Aberdeenshire Council on looking at different ways of trying to kind of provide transport in rural areas, sort of demand responsive transport, and I think also to try and raise the profile of that issue at national level, particularly in terms of funding that comes to public transport and buses in particular. There's an awful lot that comes through in terms of like congestion, and so I think that's kind of probably a key role for us in terms of sort of lobbying, I guess, at a national level, but just and obviously doing quite a lot of work with you and the public transport unit on some of those pilots for demand responsive transport, and looking at maybe how else you can do that. So that's probably the main thing from us.
Thank you, Kirsty. Susan, please.
Hi, thanks. Again, it's an issue that keeps coming up, and I wonder if it would be helpful to do a briefing for the partnership, both on the successes to date, because there is some very strong partnership working, and equally the report that went to the IJB today about some of the challenges that still remain within our climate and sustainability agenda. I think it might be helpful to have an update to this meeting, so people are aware of what's available, what's been achieved, and what the wicked issues are that we're still working on.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed for that, Susan. And actually, that's where I was going. I'm writing me notes to myself as people were speaking. There are three or four different approaches to all of this, and it may be something, again, Fiona, that the executive might want to have a look at, and pulling it all together and bringing us that report that Susan has suggested, because I do think that it is really important that we've got a collaboration here, and that everybody's understanding just what as Susan has said, the wicked issues are. So perhaps some work in the executive to bring all of these things together through Ewan, Kirsty, the work that Geraldine referred to. I think it's Lynn Boyd that's leading on the health and social care piece. That Angela and I went to the workshop. It was Lynn that's leading on that. So again, it would be really helpful to have a paper which sets it all out, and actually if we can remove any duplication, that would be really helpful. Hannah, you asked a question. Is that helpful?
Yes, and I think it shows why we're all here as well, because there's partnerships working together and sharing that information. I picked up quite a few bits of information there, so thank you.
Excellent, thank you for that. And Angela has put on the chat that the Rural Partnership in Banff-Buchan offers free transport to vaccination appointments for those who can't pay for dial-a-bus. So again, it's how we involve and work with our voluntary organisations to make sure that the community are aware that they can get that. And again, does the Tackling Poverty and Inequalities Strategic Partnership have a role in all of this too? So you can see how all of this really fits in. And the lived experience that people have, which is what was referred to earlier, and that you're not alone. We've got voices from those who have experienced this in day-to-day living. So I think all of that is really helpful, but essential that it all comes together. So that we have one approach and everybody knows exactly who's doing what. And I mean, I'm sure that happens, but actually when you're looking at a community plan and partnership position, that's us had 3 or 4 different inputs. So again, if we have a position, that'd be really helpful. And again, think about how we communicate to our communities what they can get, where they can get it, and how it can be a help. Angela.
Yeah, and just to complement what your summary was saying there, Chair, that there'll be different issues across different areas of Aberdeenshire as well. So as much as understanding what all our partner agencies are doing and how they're contributing, I suppose it's equally important to understand what the gaps or the issues are, because they will differ across the areas of Aberdeenshire.
Absolutely, and a point very well made, Angela, which brings us back to place planning, I guess. So yeah, it's all connected, isn't it? So that's all been really helpful. So Angela, is there anything else or any other asks of this partnership that you would like to make at this point?
Only, Chair, just to confirm that you're happy for me to arrange for the board to have a presentation on the Shaping Places programme at your next meeting, perhaps, or the one after that, depending on how your agenda is shaping up. We'd be happy to present on that area of work.
I see a few nods, so I think that would be most acceptable, Angela. But again, as well as the presentation about the positives, again, can we look to see how we can reduce duplication? Because I think you are having to juggle a number of different elements of your work, and I think I may be wrong, but I suspect there's quite a bit of duplication, and this is just something else that you have to manage. So if we can also identify any duplication or any areas where we can actually bring things together, because partners across the piece are stretched, so that would be really helpful. But I would welcome the presentation, Angela.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. So the recommendations are to note the review of Connected and Cohesive Communities Light Priority, to note the update on the Shaping Places for Wellbeing programme and agree to receive a presentation at the next meeting, which we've just done, and acknowledge progress being made in the Fraserburgh, Banff, Macduff and Peterhead locality plan priorities. So with that agreed, I see no indication otherwise. Thank you very much, and thank you, Angela, for leading on that particular priority. Thank you. We move then to the health and wellbeing priority, and we have a report here which Susan is going to take us through, and we're being asked, this is an update on the progress being made in relation to health and wellbeing priorities. So I'll hand over to Susan, please.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, everybody. I'll provide an update on the healthy eating, active living strand of the health and wellbeing LOIP, and Dan Shaw, will provide an update on the wellbeing, mental wellbeing strand. So just to say that we have completed all 3 phases of the HEAL community engagement work, and that was completed in July, and a report is available providing an update on the findings, and it's available on the link within this report. It highlighted some really key learning points that communities were saying that they value certain assets around health eating and active living, such as parks, beaches, countryside, other local assets being shops, food networks, community groups, community activists, local knowledge and expertise. But we've been talking a lot about this already today, and I'm sure this has been making matters much worse around the access to affordable options. Mental health and wellbeing was another barrier which people were talking about as being a key issue around this agenda. Education, self-management as well. Communities emphasise the need for clarity and simplicity and awareness of how language can reinforce health messaging. So again, we were talking about this earlier on around you know, the way that wording and messages around stigma and around poverty and issues around, say, an unhealthy weight, people can be very sensitive to how those messages are worded. So it's about being aware of that and focusing on that aspect of our work going forward. And finally, around ongoing engagement was seen as a really valuable way of improving understanding around the community's priorities, and that involving communities about bringing about change. And I think that's one of the things that I've been really proud of with this particular piece of work, about informing our actions around health eating, active living, about the resource that was put in to this community engagement work. Again, it was touched on earlier on about the value of involving communities in co-developing work, because if people aren't bought into this, if they aren't involved in developing those what works for them, then it's not going to work. So I've been really, really proud of the work that's come through the community engagement work and how that has gone on to we've always been co-producing this work with communities, with the HEAL strategic planning group. So with this feedback from the community engagement, it has directly informed the development of 35 high-level HEAL actions, and that the actions are within this report. And it's actually developed 5 themes. We actually originally had 4 themes, but then we realised that there was such a value in that continued community engagement. We have 5 themes, and the continued HEAL community engagement is one of those themes, along with physical activity, food accessibility, engagement, education, self-management, and mental health and well-being. So where we're at now is that the actions were considered and endorsed by the HEAL strategic planning group at a meeting in October. And so currently what's happening is that action monitoring framework has been developed with those 35 actions, and discussions are being had with the partners from the HEAL strategic planning group to see what it is that they can contribute to, what activities can support those actions, and then we can work out, see what's currently happening, where are the gaps, what can we focus on in terms of the gaps, and then also see what kind of alignment of, you know, that collaborative approach towards some of those actions going forward, just for that kind of more efficient way of working. And then we will have that action monitoring framework taken back to the exec and the boards in the future. We hope to have this completed in January. So that a HEAL action monitoring framework will come back to the board and the exec thereafter. I just wanted to highlight in the report too, just about maybe some of I want to say the struggles, but partnership approach to this to HEAL. And we have had a really vested interest from a number of partners and services organisations around the table to develop these actions and to support the actions going forward. I was just pointing out that we've had support from the Education Service over this period of time. We've had a health improvement officer for schools that has been involved in shaping up the actions from an education perspective. But we've recognised now that we're at a point where we really need to have more senior level support around the table from an education perspective, just to inform the decisions and the commitment that, being realistic really about what they can support around HEAL actions. And we're currently exploring those options at the moment. And just finally to highlight that the health and wellbeing lead for the Aberdeenshire Health and Social Care Partnership, they chair the strategic planning group, but that position is currently vacant, well not vacant, so it is vacant at the moment, but we have somebody coming into post in January. In the meantime, we needed somebody to chair the group, and we had the service manager from Live Life Aberdeenshire. That plan was for them to chair the meeting over the last couple of meetings. However, that's not to come to fruition just due to unforeseen circumstances. In the meantime, we had George Howie, he's the Principal Health Improvement Officer for the Health and Social Care Partnership chairing, and he'll continue to do so until the new Health and Wellbeing lead has been appointed in January. So I think that's all I have to say, and maybe can hand over to Dan.
Thank you very much, Susan. So from a mental wellbeing perspective, you can see there's a number of different actions that have been ongoing since the new officer was put into post early in October. So officer's name is Claire McCaffrey Clark. So if and when you receive contact from her, you'll know what it's in relation to. So I guess in a nutshell, what Ava are trying to do is develop a resource that enables better signposting towards mental wellbeing services across Aberdeenshire, across all of our partnership organisations and those beyond. So all of the other organisations that we're aware of across the whole of Aberdeenshire. So I guess there's a couple of different ways that we can look at that, and as part of this project, we're trying to dissect things into slightly more manageable chunks. Within the project plan, you can see there the broad objectives that we're aiming to cover. But underpinning that, I guess, is where we are right now and what that looks like in terms of the reality. So we've been having conversations with the public health team and health intelligence around trying to create a baseline snapshot and looking at what are the types of measures that we would want to use within that baseline snapshot that we can then measure and monitor over time as the work of this priority progresses. Other things to really mention, we want to take as I've said, we want to take a multifaceted approach with this one. So we want to start by looking at the organisations that are a part of the community planning partnership and look at from an inside perspective as a group of significant employers across the region. What are we doing as organisations to support and promote better mental wellbeing for our staff? And Claire will be in touch with all of your organisations to start that process. But also we'll then look at an outside perspective of those additional services that all of the organisations that are represented will be delivering or do deliver as part of their natural work. And I guess the reason for what we're trying to do is to try and bring all of this information together to show how can people access mental wellbeing services. Now, the use of services led to an interesting conversation with public health colleagues who took the health perspective of what a service is versus what a third sector perspective of what a service might be. And that led to an interesting conversation of what is a service, what is an activity, and how do we bridge that gap. So we're really in the early stages of teasing out these, I guess, the semantics of what we're trying to achieve with this priority. So we'll be coming out to your organisation shortly with a request for information. I politely ask members of the board and members of the executive to act in the role of project sponsors within your organisations to encourage your organisations to engage in this piece of work. So what we'll then be doing is we'll be looking at the third sector, and Ava will absolutely take the lead on that third sector piece of work to do something similar from looking at how organisations are supporting mental wellbeing with their employees, but also then what are the services that all those different organisations are offering. And that's not saying that a small third sector organisation in a village somewhere in Buchan would be delivering mental wellbeing services, but the services they deliver affect people's mental wellbeing in a positive way. So there's that was, I guess, the difference between the classic service that's being delivered by by the NHS, for example, versus an activity that takes place within a third sector organisation that then supports communities to look after their mental well-being. So there's lots of conversations going on at the moment around those types of things and how we map out the future. I have drawn members' attention to the issue of data sharing. So I know Amanda mentioned this more from an individual perspective earlier on in terms of personal data being shared. But I just wanted to highlight that if we are as a partnership looking at sharing information between our organisations, we just need to make sure that we're able to do that to allow the project to keep moving forward. So I would ask that as project sponsors within your own organisations, if you can have that conversation with whoever looks after the data governance within your organisations as to what that might look like and how do we try to reduce those barriers before we get to those barriers, then I would really appreciate it. So there's, as I say, we're in the early stages. Claire's been in post for 2 months now, but there's a plan in place. There's activities starting, and your organisations will be contacted as the first roll of the dice, I guess, in moving this project forward. So in a nutshell, I'll hand back to the chair and welcome any questions.
Thank you very much indeed to you both, Susan and Dan, for that very comprehensive overview of the activities that you are leading on. And I'll just open up now for any questions and or comments or observations. No, I think, Susan, without going into a lot of detail, I think you need to check with health and social care colleagues about the post you mentioned. Just get some clarification around that. That's maybe something you could do following the meeting. And I would just like to thank George in his absence very much indeed for taking on the chair of the group. Again, it's very much appreciated, and his leadership in that respect will be is much appreciated. So if we could just pass our thanks on to George, Susan, for picking that up, that's very helpful. As I say, I'm aware of the circumstances around that, so can please pass our thanks back to George, but please check with health and social care colleagues around the other issue that you raised. And Dan has asked us some specific questions. So at 5.34 and 5.6. So again, I'm looking for any comments that anyone might have around that information collation as one aspect of it. And again, just being asked as partners to consider a range of community-facing services and how they might contribute to deliver better outcomes. The other aspect is to show leadership in terms of the examples of practice, etc., that exist across our partnership. Again, any contributions would be welcome. Susan Webb,
Yeah.
and then Ewan. Yeah.
Thanks, Dan. Really great report. Just to check, so as part of the Healthy Working Lives, mental health is one of the components around that, and a number of partners sitting around the table have achieved their Healthy Working Lives awards. So I'm sure we could facilitate with the Healthy Working Lives team just some sharing of really good practice that is going on across the North East.
Okay.
Thank you, Susan. I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Susan. Ewan?
Yes, and in relation to the ask around data sharing, as part of what I'm involved in at the moment in terms of sharing the post across with Kate and myself, I attended a session this morning of an internal team within Aberdeenshire where they showed work that was ongoing in relation to, it was particularly around vulnerable people, but data sets and the bringing together of data sets and being able to represent that in a geographical information system and a mapping based system. When Susan's nodding her head, clearly knows about more about the background than I was. So I was impressed by the progress that they'd clearly made, because I reflected on an emergency incident last year to do with gas outages, when that type of information would have been invaluable in terms of sharing that across all of the emergency responders. So it did sound to me this morning, the way it was being described, is that data sharing protocols and the use of databases and information being shared across partners is entirely feasible and possible. And that there's work already ongoing. So I've made a note, Chair, that'll be something that you know, in terms of that ask from AVA, I think that partners would probably be in a pretty decent position to be able to start to look at that in a little bit more detail.
Okay, thank you. And a conversation that the IJB earlier today, there was you know, a request that sometimes we should work more closely with the community themselves, and particularly those who do have vulnerabilities, and actually maybe a conversation off table with Geraldine and colleagues might be helpful around some of that too. About how that's best presented. Angela, please.
Yeah, and a similar theme to that, Chair, I was just reflecting on, as much as the community, the partners around this table, they will be representative at a area level as well. So perhaps a good conduit would be through the existing local community planning groups, who will be familiar and aware of activities that are being progressed either through our community plan priorities or indeed our locality plans. So happy to also take an action, Chair, to assist Dan in navigating some of the landscape at an area level as well.
Sorry, Councillor.
Sorry, are you happy with that, Dan? Do you want to come back?
I'm very happy with that. Thank you very much, Angela, for that offer.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other comments around the papers? No, I just wonder, Susan, you've 35 actions. That seems rather a lot, but happy to take your advice on what what you need and what you don't, and about prioritising the actions. And indeed, you mentioned you're looking for more senior level support from Education and Children's Services. I wonder if, given the reach across that service, would it be worthwhile thinking about taking a paper to the director and getting our paper to committee? That might be something that would be helpful to you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, I don't see any other indications at this point. Thank you both, Susan and Dan, for that update. And I hope that the questions that you've posed have been answered. Just in terms of Mind Your Mind, the mental wellbeing campaign, Caroline as Vice Chair and myself as Chair of Community Plan and Partnership Board have been quoted in a media release as well. So again, anything that we can do to support these campaigns on behalf of the board, we'd be happy to do so. So if there's anything at all, please send us information and or prepared quotes for us to consider. If there's any campaigns of any kind, please let us know. We'd be surely able to support. And okay, so again, the recommendations then for this report and update is to consider and comment on the progress made to date, to consider and comment on the role of the CPP board members as mental health and wellbeing sponsors in their own organisations, and to note agreement on governance and reporting requirements for the health and wellbeing priority. Again, can we agree that, please? That's agreed. Okay, thank you very much. We've been going for an hour and a bit. Members want a 5-minute break, or are you happy to continue? I see and hear nothing. Just carry on. Okay, so that's fine then, and that takes us then to the Learning Community Partnership CLD plan. So we have Dominique Carlisle-Kitts with us, and I also see Mrs. Nichol on the call. But Dominique, would you like to introduce your report, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm conscious that we're running over a bit, so I'll keep it sharp, but quite a lot
that's
ties,
okay. Conversation's good, that's fine.
Yeah, quite a lot ties into what was discussed in the earlier report, actually. So the report that I've brought forward today is the first year of the Aberdeenshire Learning Community Partnership plan. So it's covering a flavour of the work that's happened across the partners and some of the partners around the table. But in terms of, as members have said, it's been a recovery year, but despite it being a recovery year, we've managed to achieve quite a lot. And interestingly, one of the things that we bought was a wellbeing pack that has been bought and circulated around ALCP members. And it's been a pack that's been well received, and it's around mental health and wellbeing and mindfulness, and it's for staff and partners. So that might be something that we can add into some of the conversations that are happening around the work in the previous piece that was mentioned. Also, as a partnership, we've done some work around data sharing, so we might be able to help in terms of some of the data that we've got in terms of the reach of some of our partners as well. So it's just on those that I thought I would mention that. Some of the other work that's happened in relation to the partners, there's been an adult learning forum that's been developed. And actually, since the report got put into the system, the partnership has actually met with Murray Forum to celebrate Adult Learner Week, and they're looking at expanding and meeting up with Highland Forum as well. So some interesting other bits and pieces of work that's happening that weren't updated in the report. Also, some of the work, similar to some of what colleagues have already said, we're looking at reviewing membership to ensure efficiency. I think we're all facing additional workloads and pressures, and so we're looking at how we streamline that, and streamline that particularly for the partners who are, for example, maybe national partners or much smaller organisations. And the ALCP recently approved the move to 6 local learning community partnerships, and we haven't actually progressed that yet, but we're hoping to progress that, and certainly all the big national partners who are stretched and also some of our local smaller partners were definitely welcoming the move to that, so that there's a more efficient approach to the work that the partnership can do. So we're hoping to progress that as quickly as we can before the end of the financial year. So that's the main, some highlights from that, but it's just I wanted the opportunity to be able to share what we've done in the first year with you, and you'll see that there's a flavour of that in the 2 subsequent appendixes that were attached. So thank you, and open to questions.
Thank you very much indeed for that overview and very interesting report. Absolutely. So lots of activity and some good progress being made within your service. So members, do you have any questions at all? No? Oh, Hannah.
Sorry, I'm here. Just the children in the background now. I was really interested that you've been linking up with Murray and Highland Council. I wondered, maybe it's off table, what scope there is to come to our area committees to let us know what's going on with CLD as well. It was just a mention by one of our other members recently.
Yeah, I think that would be an arrangement that we can take back into the council, Hannah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Mrs. Nichols here.
Thank you. Yes, and Chair, happy to confirm we are happy to speak to anyone about the work ongoing in the area, and it has actually been the focus of the recent round of performance, formal performance reviews at area committees. Has been a focus on community learning and development, and also within the informal performance reporting too, but very happy to do more if that's what's required. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That would be something we can take back into the council, but I don't know if partners would be interested in becoming more engaged with Dominique and her colleagues because building community capacity is going to help us all in the long term. Around community resilience, you know, we've got some winter challenges, shall we say, coming along, and I do think that engaging more with community learning development and you know, ensuring that we've all got support across the piece to build that capacity would be, I think, a really good thing to do. So if any of our partners wish to make contact with Avril and Dominique, then I'm sure you'd be open to presenting or having a discussion, or because it's often something we overlook is the ability of colleagues in community learning development to actually help us with much of what we're struggling with on a daily basis. And I do think it's a service that has a lot of strengths that are we maybe not maximising in the nicest possible way. So I think Hannah's a legacy hand. So any other comments or questions? No, I see none, but I think if we can perhaps record that in the minute that, you know, it is a service that can absolutely lend support in terms of all sorts of areas of work. I'm not, you know, I'm sure you work closely with criminal justice social work, for example, and or, you know, but if police colleagues, I'm just thinking off the top of my head here, come across, you know, if they're working in a community that perhaps requires specific interventions, you know, I just think we should really strengthen all of those links wherever we can now, and make sure that we all know about each other. So thank you very much indeed for coming along, Dominique. It's nice to see you, and I know that your post is still relatively fresh. So
very fresh.
But it's lovely to see you, and I hope that you'll come back again. If you've anything specific, don't wait for a year. If there's anything
I'll come back in a year, but yeah, if maybe before.
I think so, because if you've any asks or anything particular to share with the Community Planning Partnership, there is the executive and there's also this board. So please don't be a stranger and don't wait necessarily for the year. Be nice to see you at any point. Okay, but thank you very much. And if members want any contact details, I'm sure Prab will help you to put that in place. Okay, so the recommendations here is to consider and comment on the work that's been undertaken by the partnership. I think we can all agree that it's a considerable amount of work and very valuable, and you are required to publish a 3-year plan and report progress on an annual basis. But whilst you do that, please don't wait if there's any matters that you wish to bring us back in the meantime. So thank you very much for your time, and it's nice to see you.
Thank you,
and
Chair.
thank you, Avril. Too. Thank you. That takes us then to item 7, the Community Planning Partnership governance arrangements, and we have a paper here to ask us to consider and comment on the membership and governance structures, and this really came out of some of the conversations around the workshop when some members were just struggling a little bit to see where they added value, if they had to be here at every meeting. You know, could it be an ad hoc arrangement? How did the agenda reflect their inclusion, etc., etc. So this really follows on from that. So Fiona, would you like to introduce it, please?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, as you've said, this report sets out the governance arrangements which are currently in place, including the board, the membership of the executive board, and the delegations that are currently in place for the Community Planning Partnership, and ask the board to consider whether these are appropriate or whether any changes should be made. The Community Empowerment Act in 2015 made significant changes to community planning legislation, which had previously been contained in Part 2 of the Local Government in Scotland Act 2003. So the 2015 Act created new rights for community bodies and introduced new duties on public authorities, essentially strengthening the voices of communities in the decisions that matter to them. The Act also strengthens the statutory base for community planning. The 2015 Act expanded the number of public bodies that are subject to community planning duties, and our statutory partners are set out in the body of the report. The Act places specific duties on community planning partners, and these are linked to improving outcomes, including cooperating with partners in carrying out community planning, taking account of LOIP priorities in carrying out of their functions, and contributing funds, staff and other resources to improve local outcomes and ensuring participation of community bodies throughout community planning. The membership of Aberdeenshire's Community Planning Partnership Board and Executive is set out in paragraphs 3.6 and 3.8 of the report, and the board will note that the 2015 Act does not specify the number of representatives required from each organisation. Current delegations are set out in paragraph 10, and the board is asked to consider whether it is assured by the delegations that are currently in place and whether any further assurance is required. Additionally, the board is asked to consider whether any further delegations need to be considered at the moment, particularly given the move to a place-based approach. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much indeed, Fiona, for that introduction and just clarifying that what this report is asking us to do. So does anyone have any initial thoughts or comments on what's before us today around the governance? Kirsty.
Just a couple of really minor points, I suppose, just from a sort of Nestrans perspective. I wasn't quite sure how it had been. I think obviously we're a statutory partner and more than happy to continue with that. I would say it's probably one representative from Nestrans on the board. It's usually Rab, if not, it would be myself. But I think one is sufficient from a Nestrans point of view. We've historically not sat on the executive, just I think because of the size of the organisation and resources, we've not sat on the executive, but we have represented in the connected and cohesive communities and on the HEAL groups. So, and I think that's appropriate going forward. So it was just to pick up on those things.
No, that's very helpful, Kirsty. Thank you very much. And I'm not sure if anybody else want. Oh, Caroline, sorry.
Thanks, Anne. And thanks to colleagues who have written this up. It's actually really helpful just to read through the detail and the expectations. I think an overarching and a very strategic level, there is a real necessity for us to put our resources where our mouth is. I was going to say money where our mouth is, but as we have no money, I'm going to say resources where our mouth is in regards to what we believe the CPP can achieve and how we need to behave, how I need to behave differently as a partner in this forum. I can only commit to prioritising attendance at particular groups and meetings if I know it is going to add value and make a difference to the population of Aberdeenshire, Grampian, Aberdeenshire, depending on which CPP I'm sitting in. And therefore, I think the question that was posed there around what's delegated and what is the assurance that we're seeking. So, for example, for GIRFEC to come every 4 years to the CPP, if I'm reading that properly, I'm not sure we can get any level of assurance in something that's coming around at every 4 years. So for me, this is the moment, and this is absolutely the opportunity to reshape the governance, reshape how I show up as NHS Chief Exec, because for me, community strength and everything that we've talked about today is such a significant part of how we need to do our public sector business, particularly health. And I say that because we have so much to reform, to truly work in a community-led way, which we are on that journey. So, Anne, I'm saying that because I think I'm not just nodding this through, I'm really taking this as a poignant moment of actually what are we accountable for? How are we holding each other as peers to account for our contribution, not just in this meeting, but out with the meeting, and what more do we need to do, and how differently do we need to behave as partners to actually make a real difference in the way that, because we can all show up to a meeting. That's the easy bit. It's what we do in between and how we lead our organisations to be different. And I believe that's where we're trying to get to. So just really thoughtful that that's reflected. And as far as health seats around the table, I need to speak to my exec team and Susan, but I would be keen to increase, as I've said, the exec membership to potentially another health exec, as well as public health. But I can pick that up out with the meeting.
That's great, Caroline, and you've absolutely hit the nail on the head, and the reason why we asked this paper to come here today following the discussion at the workshop. So you have captured absolutely the reason for this paper being before us. So thank you very much indeed for your contribution. I think it just sets the scene very well. Thank you. Any other partners wish to comment at the moment? No, I don't see any. Matt.
Thanks, Chair. I think it's following on from Caroline's point really about the value we can add. So I guess from my perspective as Scottish Enterprise, it's fairly limited value that I can offer, I think, to this board. It's interesting we're having this conversation across the country about, as a national organisation, how do we add value? How do we get involved properly with community planning partnerships? And obviously we're a statutory partner, but given that this particular partnership doesn't necessarily have a theme around economy and enterprise, it's quite difficult to see how I or we can routinely add value. But I take Caroline's point about that kind of peer challenge and what we're doing offline in terms of how we're supporting some of the work streams. I think, again, the example I would give is with the Aberdeen City Community Planning Partnership. We are leading some work streams there around things like the real living wage and fair work. So there are ways in which we can be more actively involved and we can participate more effectively. But I think there is a question for us nationally about how we handle this, because obviously all CPPs are different, have different priorities. But this particular one, I guess the LOIP priorities don't necessarily lend themselves to an obvious role for Scottish Enterprise. So I think it's something that we're grappling with across the piece. I'd be interested to hear other colleagues' views on how we might be more engaged in an effective way that also helps us achieve our outcomes. So I think squaring that circle is quite difficult sometimes. It's just an observation, really, Chair.
No, I think that's very, very helpful, Matt. You've contributed already today in terms of your offer to speak to your colleague who leads on food and drink, for example, for the tackling poverty and inequalities. So should Scottish Enterprise and is Scottish Enterprise around the tackling poverty and inequality strategic partnership, for example, would that be a better place for Scottish Enterprise to be? But it is my intention, and I haven't shared this with anybody yet, but it is my intention to bring the regional economic strategy paper when it's going through the process to this board. But that might be something on an ad hoc basis you would want to be in attendance for. So, it's that kind of thinking, really. Is it best value for you and your organisation to be here every meeting, or do you pick and choose, or do you contribute through TP&I, for example? So again, all of this is open to partners to consider, and I'm very open to, if people think there's a better option or a better way to do things, please tell us, because I would rather people did feel that it was worth their while coming to these meetings and were able to contribute and got something out of it, rather than just having to sit through a 2-hour meeting because you're on the list. So I've been a bit blunt, but it's just I do think we need to have this open and honest conversation. Amanda.
Thanks, Chair. Partly in response to Matt's comment, I suppose, whilst there's not a specific economic LOIP priority, I think probably Scottish Enterprise are quite fundamental to our priorities, given the role they play. So I would hope that maybe you did feel that being part of the board and part of the structure was helpful, and certainly I think you are. I think Scottish Enterprise are around the table at tackling poverty, perhaps not every time, but certainly I know they engage, or your team engage when we need them to. I suppose the two comments I was going to make is I noticed for the board, there's obviously a partner organisation around the rural partnerships, and I think that's probably becoming a bit more challenging because the rural partnerships have morphed and changed over recent years. I think they do link in really, really positively at a local level where that's the right thing, but whether or not they still feel one of them can represent what we have in terms of rural partnerships at the board level, I don't know. So maybe that's one that and that might be why they're not regular around the table. So maybe it's one we need to make sure at a local level we're absolutely engaging with those third sector bodies who are kind of anchor. And the other would be in relation to local community planning groups. They have a delegation to some extent in that they can come through any of the LOIP priority groups. But I think perhaps having a delegation where perhaps there's a more formal link to the board may be helpful as we progress through some of the place agenda and discussions, or depending on what happens with that connected and cohesive arrangement, maybe there's a firmer delegation around local community planning groups in there. But I think it would be good to see them with a more formal relationship coming into the partners.
Thank you very much, Amanda, and I agree with what you've said entirely. But I think the journey towards place planning will actually see local community planning groups be front and centre. So that is the journey we're absolutely on. But in the meantime, perhaps we could consider how we make that link now under that delegation. So yeah, thank you for that. Ewan, please.
Yes, Chair, you've maybe touched on a little bit there of the comment I was going to make. It was as I was looking at it from the perspective of what the ask is going to be going forward, and the value that the range of partners could bring to the shift towards that place-based community planning emphasis, and particularly the socio-economic interlinks that actually frame what that is behind the place-based approach. So therefore, Matt and his team, absolutely. Part of what defines a place and what it's going to be in the future is absolutely the way in which the economy is able to thrive and develop the skills of that local the local workforces, all those different elements. And when I look at the attendance of the range of other partners that have the opportunity to formally link into the CPP, then there's a number of them on that list who I think potentially would see added value in being involved in what the board is about to oversee, I would anticipate, on the back of moving to a more place-based approach.
Thanks, Ewan. I think that's helpful too. But again, I would just ask everybody to consider how best the structure will serve your purpose to serve our purpose. So I think that's a question for everybody. So what I would intend to suggest then is that we write to all the partners listed on here, and we ask them the question to consider how they would best contribute and be included in the work of the Community Plan and Partnership Board, to consider the number of representatives they have, both on the board and on the executive. And I would absolutely, with a community planning partnership hat on, invite Aberdeenshire Council to review the numbers of members and officers that they present to the board also. So I would include all the organisations here, and I think what we need is an executive and a partnership that does, as Caroline and Matt have indicated, deliver outcomes and consider our behaviours where they should add value and make a difference, and that accountability is absolutely there in terms of peer accountability also. And I think we should write to all the organisations on that basis and seek their response. And clearly, if they don't believe that they would want to attend every meeting, they may wish to have an ad hoc presence if the agenda reflects their particular area of work. In terms of the delegations, I agree completely with Caroline, and that's the one that sticks out for me is GIRFEC. The Community Planning Partnership, through myself, were notified of a care inspection of children at risk of harm, and that came to me as chair of this board. So that inspection has been carried out under the auspices of community planning, albeit it's an education and children's services inspection in the main, although there is the transitions to adult care that arise from that. So again, through health and social care, but that came to community planning. So that's, you know, so there's clearly a link needs to be made, a stronger link in GIRFEC, and what's currently existing is not acceptable. But again, do members feel that an annual update in some of these issues is appropriate? The Tackling Poverty and Inequality Strategic Lead Group, we get that, we get the 3 priorities, we get the Aberdeenshire Alcohol and Drugs Partnership, an annual progress report. I think we should move to biannual. I think we should get that twice a year, frankly. And the Community Justice Partnership, an annual progress report. Are you content that meets the needs of this group? Caroline?
Yeah, and I'm really thoughtful as you go through these. You will be very familiar with them all, and some of us won't. So I'm wondering if what is it that we're assuring is the key question, and therefore if there is a bit of a narrative around, as there would be in all, what is the assurance ask of this of the CPP as opposed to, for example, the progression of particular pieces of work that we managed by either other groups or a specific partner. And that might help us to, I'm sure your suggestions and proposals of the timings are absolutely valid, but difficult for me, and I would imagine others, to contribute to that because we don't know the details. So understanding what we're assuring, I think, would help inform us of the frequency.
Right, on that basis then, and I appreciate that, Caroline, can we remit the delegations back to the executive, Fiona, please, and ask them to come back at the next meeting with some narrative around all of this, and maybe some background as to the expectation for the of the board around some of this. I mean, for example, Caroline, the Community Justice Partnership, the annual progress report is an annual report that comes based on a format that is prescribed by the Scottish Government, and there is no room for manoeuvre at all. So, but again, if Fiona, if the executive could look at that and attach a narrative around it, and just see where, see if we can get a bit more information attached to the delegations, if that's okay, and then so we'll defer that bit. Okay. So we then turn to the recommendations then. We've been asked to consider and comment on the board membership and governance structures, consider and comment on the current representation and whether they're appropriate, consider and comment on the current delegations, agree a new delegation is created to local community planning groups, and instruct officers to update the CPP governance structure to reflect new working arrangements. So really, some of those recommendations have been subsumed. So we will write to each of the partners listed in the report and ask them to consider their representation in terms of numbers and frequency of attendance. We will ask them perhaps to give us a little bit of information about how they see their role. We'll remit the delegations back to the executive committee to come back to the next meeting with additional information. Can we agree that the new delegations created to local community planning groups? And again, within that report that comes back, look at the frequency and how. And again, we will need to defer the update to the governance structure until we've considered the delegations. So that one's deferred. Okay, that happy? Everybody happy with that? Okay, thank you very much. And again, our final report is the delivering place-based community planning, and that's Fiona, please.
Thanks, Chair. So this report is essentially to provide an update to the board in terms of the ongoing work which is happening around developing a place-based approach to community planning, and it presents a number of different recommendations around the development and practicalities of that approach. I guess I would like to emphasise early on that the report represents the start of the work around developing the approach, and that a lot of work is still required while we work out the details, so things like the practicalities and the logistics of the approach. So following the board meeting in September, a workshop was held on the 13th of October with local community planning group chairs and community planning officers to discuss some of the ideas that had been recommended by the board following its workshop and subsequent meeting. Looking at defining place, looking at the future delivery of connected and cohesive communities, looking at delivery of locality plans, and looking at governance arrangements. That workshop in October was really well attended and provoked some lively discussion and debate. There was a recognition for the need for clarity around how we define place, and a clear need for community involvement and engagement around this. And the workshop and executive also considered questions around implementation, monitoring, reporting of place plans. There was a clear view from the attendees at the workshop and from the subsequent discussion at the executive that community engagement is going to be front and centre of the place-based approach. In terms of connected and cohesive communities, there had been agreement at the September board meeting that this shouldn't be continued as a LOIP priority, and also a recognition and acknowledgement of the volume and value of the actions that are currently being progressed by the strategic lead group, and agreement that these should be continued under the auspices of a place-based framework. We also discussed locality plans at the workshop and the November meeting of the executive. These are a statutory requirement. Each local authority is required to produce and deliver at least one locality plan for its area. These have two main functions, which are to tackle inequalities and to enable communities to participate in decision making at a local level. The strategic community planning team is currently investigating our statutory obligations around locality planning and how this sits within a place-based framework, and an update will be provided at the next board meeting. I think it's really important to highlight that there's already a lot of work going on across Aberdeenshire around place, with different approaches and different levels of partner involvement at a local area. And it's important for us all to realise and recognise the commitment to place, and also to recognise the resource commitment. And this reflects back to the previous paper around governance arrangements and the delegations that we currently have in place. Finally, Chair, I would just like to clarify the reference in 3.13, which refers to the development of place plans commencing in January 2023. And it was really just to highlight that that will be the start of the development process, rather than a kind of expectation that we will have place plans ready to deliver from January. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Fiona, for that feedback, and I'm glad that there was a useful workshop in October, so thank you very much indeed for that. Colleagues, do you have any questions or comments? Angela and Amanda, do you have anything particular you want to throw into the mix at this point, or do you think that the report reflects, from your point of view as area managers and chairs of local community planning groups, the direction of travel?
Yeah, I think we've had a number of discussions on it. I think as Fiona has said, I think it gives us that starting point. It's giving us the commitment, and we will then work through how we bring this to life. I'm very aware we are underway with the Peterhead plan. We've been underway for quite a while, and we're taking a particular approach. Our colleagues in Inverurie Anne's taking an approach, so we'll all do this slightly differently, and it may not be as swift as we would like in some cases, but I think we are all, each area is starting something and working out what's going to be right for place, working with partners to ensure that is supported. So I think this is a good starter to move us on, get that commitment, partners all really in the same place, that place is that lens we want to look through, and we can come back and update the board as we work our way through what is the start of a real shift, I think, for us, but it's a positive shift.
That's great, Amanda. Thank you very much. Angela.
Yeah, I would just echo that and maybe just build on what Amanda touched on around the Peterhead plan and Anne's approach in Inverurie that Fiona mentioned at the start around that funding commitment. The Shaping Places agenda, which I updated you on earlier this afternoon, also builds a strong foundation around place planning for Fraserburgh. And the council is clearly committed to a place approach and is looking to develop a strategy internally. So that wider partnership commitment is really helpful, and I think the paper absolutely creates a strong foundation for that to happen. And then the mechanics operationally at an area level and through all the partnerships routes into that at an area and a national level will be really helpful to come back to the board with next year.
Thank you very much, Angela. Any other comments or questions? Caroline, thank you.
Sorry, I couldn't get my hand to go up. So just to show explicitly NHS Grampian's commitment to this piece of work, recognising that will be of varying degrees, and you'll be working really closely with the Health and Social Care Partnership, but there is much more scope also around other services, and colleagues such as Geraldine will absolutely hold me to account on making sure we're doing that. So absolutely committed, believe it is a big step change, and that clarity is really helpful. And whilst I completely buy into testing things and not having to do everything full scale, just being able to be quite clear on the communication and at what point we think we're at a reasonably settled stroke stable decision point that we could start to redesign other parts of systems, other partners to align to that. So kind of how do you phase that so that we know that it's reasonably settled and stable in regards to where you've got to, as you're describing, Peterhead and Inverurie, developing for local needs and organically, but for services and partners that are trying to deliver stuff Grampian wide. That does pose challenges, not that we won't address them or meet them head on, but the timing of that will be important. Hopefully that's helpful.
That is helpful. Thank you, Caroline and Angela, and Amanda and Fiona. I'm sure we'll take all of that back into the thinking as we progress. Is there an area that's been thought about for the pilot? And I would respectfully suggest it's not in Amanda and Angela's area, because they've got rather a lot on their plate, perhaps. But they will tell me otherwise, I'm sure. But is there an area that you're thinking about, Fiona?
So I think I had suggested one in each administrative area, but that's a suggestion and absolutely open for discussion.
And are area managers able to commit to that?
I think it needs some further discussion around how we approach that.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. But yes, I think we could agree in principle that would be the case. But I'd be mindful of certainly the commitments already in the north. But Angela and Amanda will tell us otherwise if that's the case. But they're clearly working towards that place planning with what they're doing currently. So happy to take advice as we go forward. So no other contributions indicated, so we'll go to the recommendations. There are 8 recommendations, and I know I've been reading them out, but there's quite a lot here. But we can agree the recommendations 1.2.1 to 1.2.8, with 1.2.3 being agreed in principle. Further information will be shared. Can we all agree to that, please? I see nods, and thank you all very much indeed for your and thank you, Caroline, for your commitment towards the delivery of place planning, and thank you, Fiona, for the report. It's been very helpful. So, colleagues, that concludes our meeting today. Thank you all very much indeed for your attendance and all your contributions. It's been really helpful. We will write out to you as organisations and seek your advice as to how you think you would be best placed to take forward community planning work in the future. But in the meantime, thank you all very, very much indeed. And I hope that's been a useful meeting for you. And we'll see you in the new year. But in the meantime, I'd just like to wish you all a very Merry Christmas and a very happy and peaceful and prosperous 2023, and hope, I say this advisedly, I hope you won't have as many challenges as you might think you were going to have over the winter period. So much appreciated, and thank you for everything that you do. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Anne.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Thanks,
Thank
Chair.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Bye, everyone.